Sorry folks, welcome back to the Grand Solar Minimum channel. Today is Thursday, September 27th, 2018. Once again, apologize for the audio issue that I'm having, apparently. Our solar wind speeds are sitting at 425.6 kilometers with a density of 6.2. And I was looking at our sun and we are blank once again. Now this is 14 straight days without a sunspot. And I wanted to show you guys this. Right now we don't have anything cooking either. So curious to see how much longer that we will see this spotless streak continue, as right now it sits at 14 and it could continue into the foreseeable future for a long period of time. KP indices are sitting at 2 and 24-hour max is at a 3. And this is the SDO right now. We'll take a look at it in motion. We don't see any sunspot activity at this time. And there is a slight coronal hole development right here. Not yet Earth facing, but still nothing major. But I did want to point something else out real quick. And I'll wait till this restarts to the beginning here. Here we go. Take a look right here, guys, in this little circled area. No, that is not a stellar core next to the sun. But what it is a filament release here. And it's being hurled right at us now, accordingly, in the northern part of our magnetosphere, so it's not going to really affect us much. But I wanted to show you guys this image, and you even see the satellite shake seconds after this release. Watch it right here once again. So an interesting little development there with a filament release today as it was hurled in our direction, but will not have a direct impact of any kind because of its location. So but this is just part of the things of a minimum sun does, and thought I'd share that with you today. Again, not a stellar core next to the sun. Taking a look at our TSI reading for today. Actually, this is for September 16th 2018. Our TSI has dropped a little bit to a 1360.65. Now it's been hovering around the 0.7 region for quite some time, and here recently is starting to show a little bit of declining action. However, very, very, very minimal. Let's go ahead and get into some headlines. The rapid cyclogenesis in the Mediterranean Sea, metacane Zobras, is forming, threatening Greece and Turkey. In a response to the Arctic outbreak that pushed into the southern Balkan Peninsula, a cold core upper low is deepening in the southern central Mediterranean, and cyclogenesis is taking place. It will lead into the formation of tropical-like cyclone metacane by evening. And taking a look at a couple of radar images of the storm, it's getting its act together. We've been kind of warning about this for a few days. Have we seen it on severeweather.eu? And here is now another warning once again from the watchers, is it will make impact at some point. Now, model guidance is now trending towards a more southerly track of the metacane than what was anticipated in yesterday's model runs. And as we see here in the bottom of our screen, the track here is going to just miss Athens. It's going to go just to the south of Athens, but make landfall near the town of Izmir, and other inland towns will also be affected. Right now it looks like Bursa, Istanbul, Turkey by Sunday is possible. It says the metacane may even hit Crete on late Saturday and southwest Turkey on Sunday after nearing Penelope's earlier. Severe wind and life-threatening flash floods threat are expected in some areas. And thanks again to the watchers for a very well report here on what's going to happen. This is the total accumulation of rain that is expected to fall in the region. And we see some gray areas, which is between 100 and 200 millimeters of rain. The maximum amount of rain looks like around 389 to 400 millimeters, which is right around the 15-inch mark of rain in the 400 millimeters. So we'll keep our eyes on that storm with any updates that we can get. An exceptionally rare first September tropical cyclone since 1950 forms in the southwest Pacific. Tropical storm Luia. Tropical cyclone, I should say, Luia, formed in the southwest Pacific Ocean on September 26, 2018, as the first named storm of the 2018-19 South Pacific tropical cyclone season. This is the first tropical cyclone to form in the southwest Pacific during the month of September since Tropical Cyclone 02P on September 12, 1950, 68 years ago. The season officially starts on November 1st and ends at April 30th. It says here now, Chris Brandolino said that Luia comes even before forecasters have put together their cyclone outlook for the region, due to be published next month, by the way. He says it's very unusual. In fact, this is the first tropical cyclone to form in the month of September, going back to 50, which we already mentioned. Here is the track of this storm. Nowhere to be made landfall at any time. In fact, the cone of uncertainty is very wide here in the next several days. But still worth mentioning when you haven't seen a storm like this form in the Southwest Pacific in over 68 years. Leave the link in the description. You guys can check that out. It's been an active Pacific season, that's for sure. And more news to talk about too with Pacific. Some very eye-raising news, actually. Tropical storm Kirk nearing Lesser Antilles may pass the south or over Martinique. Tropical storm Kirk continues moving west over the Atlantic towards the Lesser Antilles. That center may pass over Martinique by the end of the day. Tropical storm warnings in effect for Barbados, St. Lucia, Dominica, Martinique, and Guadeloupe, while tropical storm watch in effect for St. Vincent and Grenadines. Interest elsewhere in the central and northern Lesser Antilles should monitor the progress of Kirk. Now, this storm had died and turned into nothing and has now reemerged as is nearing waters that are more favorable for also hurricane conditions, not only moving into waters that are more favorable, but also, and boy, look at the tropical storm that is above that. That is the storm that's in the middle of the Atlantic right now. I think it's Leslie, and it's just a tropical depression right now, but that thing is huge, and it's just sitting right now dwelling in the Atlantic Ocean. But what I also want to mention too about this storm is that it's also running away from the grasp of the Sahara Desert with its dust forecast here. As you see in this particular region, we are still really, it's the storm right now is actually heading out of this motion of Saharan desert sand that is reaching parts now near the Caribbean and heading towards Central America. But as you can tell, the lighter brown is very light. It's not going to have the impact on lessening a storm, say as the plume of sand that's coming behind it. That would definitely have an effect on any kind of moisture or a storm that would be trying to develop at this point. So I wanted to point that out as well really quick. Leave the link in the description, and let's move on to, okay, Typhoon Trami has weakened, but it is expected to hit Okinawa Islands with a Cat 2 or 3 strength on September 28th, which is tomorrow. Now, this thing was a super typhoon last weekend and has weakened due to interaction with less favorable seawaters and more shear closer to Asia this week. However, this very large typhoon is still very impressive in satellite imagery. Trami is expected to cross the Ryukyu Islands and make a very close pass to Okinawa on Saturday at a Cat 2 or Cat 3. Now, the Ryukyu Islands have been in the news for the last 2 months with torrential downpours. So again, here is another storm in another area that does not need the potential flooding rains here. And this storm has definitely weakened, but still an oppressive typhoon. It's no longer a super typhoon. We've got sustained winds right around 73 miles per hour. And here is our track of this storm as it does head up and curl towards Japan and looks to make landfall with a decent amount. So still not done with this storm. It has weakened some. Central pressure right now sitting at 967, but it is predicted to drop once again. So we will keep our eyes on this very closely. Traumi will be moving just over Okinawa on Saturday. Depending on the position of the eye, the island could get hit very hard if the strongest eastern part of the eye wall hits the area. Hurricane force winds, storm surge, and flash floods would be devastating. Indeed, it would be. And this is the worst case scenario here with this storm. Completely engulfs the islands. Peak winds are going to be around 200 kilometers per hour. New typhoon forming further southeast of Traumi, which could potentially become another storm typhoon next week. Again, we were dealing with Mancut, turned into a super typhoon, and now Traumi, and now we're talking about another one next week. Rainfall sums up more than 800 millimeters of rainfall is possible through Sunday. That's 31.46 inches of rain. I looked it up. So we will keep our eyes once again, another giant storm bringing a ton of rain to Japan and the Asia area. This is now the third big typhoon that we've seen come through this area, plow through the Philippines. Hong Kong's been hit. Thankfully, the storm is veering away from that same area, but unfortunately, Japan, which had a few weeks off from the chaos, is now once again back in the basically bullseye of this storm right now, and it does look like it's going to make landfall a couple of different times. So I want to talk a little bit about what we've said before in the past. This might be a repeat story here, but this was wrote originally August 9th, 2018, and I really reread this and thought about this a lot, and this to me should be infuriating to everyone, global warming and global cooling communities. And the reason why I say this is because I do believe that there are some people who are misinformed and like a good debate and do have what they think is evidence, and they have a decent time arguing what they think is fact with a climate skeptic who does not agree with one who thinks man controls warming. But now we have the BBC, which is saying they've told their staff no longer to need to invite climate change deniers. I'm going to call them skeptics, though. I don't like this whole denier thing, because I think there's a difference here between climate change deniers and climate change skeptics. And the difference is a climate change skeptic is someone who is questioning the science of what climate change is really, is what the consensus is saying is causing climate change, versus climate deniers. Climate change deniers could be people who deny that our climate is changing and are just really downplaying the whole situation, saying, oh, we're not global warming or global cooling, it's just weather, it happens. So to me, there's a difference. I don't fall under that climate change denier. I am a climate change skeptic. And I feel like that I have a very valid reason to be a skeptic based on the fact that this channel and the science that we cover doesn't quite line up with people in the anthropogenic global warming crowd. But reading on, it says it has also asked all editorial staff to take a course on how to report on climate change, said that its coverage of the topic is wrong too often. Interesting. New BBC editorial policy on climate change states to achieve impartiality, you do not need to include outright deniers of climate change in BBC coverage. In the same way you would not have someone denying that Manchester United won 2-0 last Saturday, the referee has spoken. The referee has spoken. So basically, folks, what they're saying is that man-made global warming is the score on the scoreboard, and that's that. In other words, anyone who's a climate skeptic is not allowed to question these people that believe that man has something to do with climate change. I'll go on reading here. April Ofcom ruled that the Today program on Radio 4 had breached broadcasting rules by not sufficiently challenging Lord Lawson of Blaby, the former Conservative Chancellor of the Exchequer and a climate change skeptic, over claims that he made in an interview. Lord Lawson is the founder of Global Warming Policy Foundation, a climate skeptic think tank The director of the foundation said that the new BBC policy was basically telling editors, don't touch the Global Warming Policy Foundation. Fran Unsworth, the BBC's director of news and current affairs, emailed its journalists this week asking them to book a place on a 1-hour course that covers the latest science, policy, research, and misconceptions to challenge, giving you confidence to cover climate change accurately and knowledgeably. So basically what the BBC is telling its reporters is that, look, you need to go and digest this garbage that we're going to feed you and force it down your throat so you can force it down the masses' throats. That's what this is saying. The email leaked to the website Carbon Brief, which seeks to raise awareness of the threat of climate change, referred staff to a crib sheet that includes the new policy. The policy says climate change has been a difficult subject for the BBC, and we get coverage of it wrong too often. The climate change science community is clear that humans have changed the climate, but specifically how to more difficult to the evidence. So basically they're admitting that they don't have the evidence to prove this. They just say it a lot, but they don't have a specific answer for how man changes the climate. A section entitled "What's the BBC's Position" says that man-made climate change exists. If the science proves it, we should report it. The science doesn't prove that man-made global warming or climate change is real. You people just spout out regurgitated commentary from Al Gore and Michael Mann and Bill Nye, the science guy. You guys just regurgitate because those are big names and those consensus should all just fall in line. Policy adds that there may be occasions to hear from a denier, but only with appropriate challenge from the knowledgeable interviewer. So basically, if you didn't take that course, then you're not going to be able to confront a denier because you weren't coached on how to overcome objections of a climate denier. Basically, that's what that is. This is like a sales training for a company that has a bunch of salesmen that can't sell, so they have to teach them how to cheat, basically. And that happens a lot, folks. It also, I already read that. The document says the BBC journalists need to be aware that the guest's viewpoint and how to challenge it effectively. Basically telling its broadcasters, look, you need to realize how to overcome this person's objections. We can't look stupid. The Global Warming Policy Foundation does not disclose who funds it. Benny Paisley, the foundation's director, said that Lord Lawson has been invited to the Today program only twice in the past 5 years, and on both occasions, complaints from campaigners had resulted in the BBC apologizing. He added the memo puts in writing what most people have known for the past 10 years, which is that anyone skeptical of climate alarmism isn't allowed on the BBC. They cherry-pick the people who make claims. No one is allowed to counter their own bias. The BBC is taking a position on a very controversial issue. Climate change is real and humans are contributing to it, but it's not as alarming as the BBC very often makes it out to be. Just that last comment there at the end about how real climate change is by humans is just more of the same. It's almost like this person's trying to be centered somehow with his stance on climate change. Again, I don't think anyone in this group denies climate change. We disagree with the concept of how climate change is happening. Is what we agree. Climate is changing. Absolutely. We're going from a warmer climate to a much colder climate. That's the change. And then the secondary to that is, how is that caused? Carbon taxes for dummies. Given the amount of misinformation being generated by politicians, pollsters, pundits, think tanks, and other think about carbon taxes. Let's discuss what is true and what isn't. Carbon taxes raise taxes. True. He gives a little explanation. He says carbon tax makes big polluters pay. That is false, and I'll read why he says that. A carbon tax makes all of us pay because we buy goods and services that big polluters create through the use of fossil fuel energy, meaning oil, coal, and natural gas. These big polluters then pass along their increased cost to us as higher taxes or prices, typically with additional financial help from the government, meaning us, so they don't bolt to jurisdictions which don't have a national carbon tax like the United States. It says all carbon taxes are alike. That's false. Cap and trade, a carbon tax by another name, is the worst form of a form of carbon tax because of its lack of financial transparency. The best is carbon-free and dividend, a revenue-neutral carbon tax recently proposed by Canadians for Clean Prosperity, headed by a former Stephen Harper policy director, Mark Cameron. A revenue-neutral carbon tax returns the money raised to Canadian households in the form of equal dividend checks or income tax cuts, is what they're saying. Carbon fee and dividend means, as Canadians for Clean Prosperity claims, that the vast majority of households, regardless of income level, would receive more money in the form of carbon dividend checks than they would pay in carbon taxes. False, in a sense of being unrealistic. Revenue-neutral carbon fee and dividend, assuming Prime Minister Justin Trudeau doesn't snatch the money back from us directly or indirectly, a big assumption, would leave about 2/3 of households financially better off and 1/3 worse off because lower income families buy fewer energy consuming goods and services that higher income ones do. And just an interesting article to read about the carbon tax in Canada. I know we have a lot of listeners who are from Canada, and I also know that here lately there's been a lot of news being made about some of these people actually pulling out of these climate plans. And the support for Justin Trudeau, in my opinion, it seems like it's always been kind of not high for him. Most people don't like him across the border, and there's a lot of people that are in Canada that don't care for him either. And a lot of lawmakers are also jumping off of this climate change now. I've seen a lot of headlines in Canada where they're trying to get rid of some of these carbon taxes, and they're not on board with these Paris Agreement climate targets. A lot of these lawmakers throughout the provinces of Canada are just not buying it. Alberta, BC, Ottawa, you guys are all starting to smarten up to this so-called carbon tax and how it's our fault. Well, let's go to this real quick. I wanted to talk about, I got to go back to this real quick because, maybe not. I don't know. I don't want to rant really too much about it other than the fact that I just find it, how can anybody with logic and common sense go for this new policy that the BBC has now about climate deniers and climate change skeptics? How can anybody that can say that they're a logical and common sense person actually look at this as a fair and balanced way of reporting on the climate? And what it is that they're finding out that the climate skeptics are smarter than the people talking about global warming made by man. That's the biggest problem. All right, I'll move on. And thanks to Rob, I was talking to him about this in a chat the other day, and I thought this was very important because WKBW in Buffalo posted out another outlandish claim about the climate and everything like that. Well, their claim was that don't go to Iceland anytime soon, folks, because it's about to blow. And the person that wrote the study about the CO2 atmospheric release is a little upset that the tabloids are turning this into fear porn. Despite screaming headlines in the British tabloids and even the normally Sunday Times, there is no sign that Iceland's Katla volcano will erupt anytime soon, scientists say. The wild headlines warn that the Icelandic giant is about to erupt, and scientists warn huge Iceland volcano is about to erupt, and it could be even dwarf the 2010 ash cloud coverage. The stories were based on a recent scientific study that said that Katla volcano is globally important to the source of atmospheric carbon dioxide, one of the main greenhouse gases responsible for global warming. Wrong, according to the study's lead author, and did not say whether the volcano was nearing eruption, especially one that could cause widespread disruption of European air travel. I said explicitly, and this is the person who wrote the study about this, about the increasing gases. She says, I said explicitly that we are in no position to say whether or not Katla volcano is ready to erupt, and that air traffic disruption in case of an eruption is unlikely to be as serious as in 2010. She goes on to say that they go on to talk about the Katla volcano is located in southwestern Iceland, not far from the infamous, I am not going to try to pronounce that, Eyjafjallajokull volcano. Really? Anyone that could pronounce this correctly, send it to me in a video message, and I don't know, maybe we'll throw you a Grand Solar Minimum sticker, because that's crazy. It was incredibly disappointing to see what the Sunday Times have gone down the route of trashy tabloids. According to the author of the study, the article misinforms the readers and undermines me as a scientist and a specialist in my field. Shameful job, she says. Well, I would agree with you there if you wouldn't have said this at the bottom. Overall, however, the real shame here is that the true version of the story is already very important and interesting itself. We discovered something totally unexpected, mind-blowing about Katla volcano, and the discovery may help forecast its eruptions better in the future. That's not what I wanted to tell. Oh, it's up here. Sorry. She did clarify that all world's volcanoes combined emit less than 2% of the CO2 emissions from human activities. So there should be no suggestion that climate change due to greenhouse gas emissions could be caused by volcanoes rather than human activities. So your credibility was not affected by the fear porn artist that said that this thing was going to blow. She said, this article misinforms their readers and undermines me as a scientist and a specialist in my field. No, what undermines you as a specialist in your field and a scientist is this outlandish claim that you make here at the back, clarifying that the combined world volcanoes emit less than 2% of the CO2 emissions, of 2% of the CO2 emissions from human activities. Less than 2%. Now, all of us, we already know that our man-made CO2, if any contribution, is a 0.004%. So this lady is a scientist and an expert in her so-called field. Here I'm defending her in one breath because she's saying it's not going to blow, which is absolutely true. It's not a matter of when, but if it blows, which they have no way of knowing when, and they can't tell you when. They're not specialists in this field like she claims. But telling us all here that the world's volcanoes combined emit less than 2% of 0.004% of our CO2 emissions. That's what she's saying. So if you're someone who's in the global warming community, just know that she's saying that the world volcanoes, I think everybody that follows any kind of science knows that world volcanoes emit way more CO2 than what this woman is suggesting right here. That is where we undermine you as a scientist and a specialist in your qualified field. Shameful should be added and pointed towards you for this outlandish claim that volcanoes combined emit less than 2% of the CO2 emissions from human activity. Jesus. Woo! I just, it gets better every day. And it's not just from the global warming people, but you've got people in our community that like to hype up weather and blame it on, you guessed it, grand solar minimum. A natural cold front is dipping down across the United States late this month into October. And we have people out there titling it grand solar minimum. Question mark. No, it's fall. We get it. It's going to be colder this winter and the winters to come. Yes. But I wish that we could get some balance out there from people who say they're experts or they're avid followers of the topic. Yet they want to blame every snowflake, every hail ball, every cold front on the grand solar minimum. And I think I've made it very clear about this channel. A, we report on stories that matter to the grand solar minimum. And B, the grand solar minimum is not something you're going to see overnight. So you can't sit here and collect all these cold fronts and all these snowstorms and say grand solar minimum. You can't do it. That's just retarded. Sorry. You can't do it. And so it's not just the warming crowd that sensationalizes. We got it over here in the grand solar minimum community too, where people like to blame every little thing that deals with cold weather on the grand solar minimum. How about we got an ENSO cycle going on right now? We got a very bizarre situation right now. And, you know, talking with Rob, I'm kind of with him on this. Well, I shouldn't say that, but I don't mean to put you out there like that, Rob. Sorry, buddy. This reading right here is very peculiar. We're sitting right now in the El Nino region at a 0.665. Now, folks, you guys have watched this with me all year long, since April, through the summer. It's been slowly declining, as you see right here, and then just all of a sudden, we have almost seen a full degree increase in the El Nino 3-4 index, and within a week. We haven't seen more than 0.2 of a value change in the temperature in that region in 3 or 4 months. And just in 1 week, we see a value rise of 0.665 above. Yeah, it's an El Nino right now. And it's right here. But just really, really weird. Like, it was almost like the real data was not pleasing the people who were forecasting El Nino now. Like your AccuWeather and your Weather Channel, how they push El Nino, it's here, it's here. They've been saying it all summer long. And now those same forecasters are probably laughing. Like, I told you. Or is this another case of numbers failing us? Are they being messed with? Is the satellite glitching out? I mean, strange. Almost a full degree Celsius in 7 to 10 days. When we haven't seen but maybe 10 to 0.30 temperature drop at most since July. Again, folks, grand solar minimum is upon us. It's beginning. But I'm not going to sit here and tell everyone every time we get a major snowstorm, grand solar minimum. Told you, grand solar minimum. And to me, somebody who has to keep saying that over and over again, it just feels like it's the same thing of trying to manipulate the masses. You're pounding it in. Snow, grand solar minimum. Hail, grand solar minimum. You're pounding it in. You're blaming every single weather. No, I know we report stories every day that talk about floods, snow, hail, all that, severe weather, purple skies. But we try to make a connection to elements that matter to the grand solar minimum. When we talk about these storms that drop 30 to 40 inches of rain, we talk about the abundance of cosmic rays that are in the atmosphere that are combining with water vapor and other particles in our atmosphere that are already naturally there, and that is intensifying the amount of rain that falls. When we talk about hail, we talk about the reason why, again, cosmic ray influx. When we talk about cold fronts, we don't necessarily talk about grand solar minimum. We just say, here comes a cold front. And right now, it's September going into October, and this is about the time of the year where we start to see things start turning in the weather. Nothing unusual, folks. Now, we do have some snow coming. I'll get to that just here in a second. One more article I want to cover before we get into the weather, and it's a new book. This physicist says evidence of human role in climate is lacking. And I think this is one where I wanted to read off. Yes, so here we go. I'm going to read this as much as I can real quick. In a new book from physicist Ralph B. Alexander, Science Under Attack, The Age of Unreason, he sees abuse in science. Excerpts from the book. Evidence and logic are lacking in many areas of public debate today on hot-button issues ranging from dietary fat to vaccination. The Science Under Attack, Dr. Alexander shows how science is being abused, sidelined, or ignored, making it difficult or impossible for the public to form a reasoned opinion about important issues. That is 125% correct. Just like the article I just showed you about the volcano in Katla, where the scientist is telling you that CO2 emissions are greater from man than it is from earthquakes and volcanoes. And then you go to our channel and we tell you the opposite. So what do you believe? So I agree with that statement 120%. Conventional scientific wisdom holds that global warming and consequent changes in the climate are primarily our own doing. But what few people realize is the actual scientific evidence for a substantial human contribution to climate change is flimsy. It requires highly questionable computer climate models to make the connection between global warming and human emissions of carbon dioxide. No proof warming is human-caused. The multiple lines of evidence which do exist are simply evidence that the world is warming, not proof that the warming comes from human activity. That supposed proof relies entirely on computer models that attempt to simulate the Earth's highly complex climate and include greenhouse gases as well as aerosols from both volcanic and man-made sources, but almost totally ignore the natural variability. Models way off the mark, so it shouldn't be surprising that models have a dismal track record in predicting the future. Most spectacular, the models failed to predict the recent pause or hiatus in global warming from the late 1990s to about 2014. This part is important to me because with the CO2 levels continuing to rise through the 90s into 2014, where is our temperature rise? They keep going up. CO2 is going up, 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 up. But yet there is a 24-year pause in warming. Hiatus. One other thing I want to mention about this article. This 1.6 degrees Fahrenheit, by the way, folks. So when NOAA says that we're at that 1.5 degree temperature, where the science are supposed to flip out when it gets to 2, so that's in Fahrenheit. What is that in Celsius? 0.9. Here's my connection. They are attacking this number right here, and I will move me out of the way to show you what I am talking about. Very top here. Back in February of 2016, not this one, I'll get that one out of there. 2016, we had a reading Celsius now, 0.88, 2016, which is what? 1.5 degrees Fahrenheit. So scientists are referring to this number here. This is where they are worried that we're tipping the point of the catastrophic global climate change because of that reading right there. But what they're ignoring is the rest of the data since 2016. And it's showing we are not going to head back towards that temperature and dice. In fact, here in less than a week, we will now know the results for September, as August was a 0.19 degrees Celsius above baseline. Any takes on bets for what it's going to be in September? I'll go out on a limb. I thought August was a hot month for it to drop the way it did. September started off just as hot, but I think after that, it kind of leveled off to average. But, you know, here's where we get caught up in the predictions. I was right, you were wrong. We can sit here and make predictions all day long. I think the data is going to be the best predictor here of what's happening. And unless we get some kind of sudden spike in lower global atmospheric anomalies, it's going to continue to drop. Maybe it goes back up a little bit. But I don't think we're going to be in for the big surprise like we were in August. I don't think it's going to be a deepest drop. It may drop maybe down to a 0.16. If it goes up, maybe a 0.21. I'd be shocked if it was over 30. But, you know, these numbers every month, you know, I know a couple months ago I predicted it to be a certain stage and it rose. So we'll just continue to watch. It's fun to guess. I think everybody in our group that follows this channel agrees that it's fun to guess, and I'm sure some of you right now in the chat are making your best stabs at it right now. But I wanted to bring that out because this, I finally understood the other day when I was reporting about how NOAA is saying that we're at that 1.5 degree mark and it's almost catastrophic. Now I understand what they're talking about. They're talking about the 0.88 reading that we had in February of 2016. They are talking about the fact that we have hit that mark, but since have declined, and they're ignoring that. They don't want to talk about that. They don't want to talk about since that reading, we have dropped almost 0.75 degrees Celsius since that time. fact, if we're being precise here, we've dropped 0.69 degrees. Is it 0.79? No, it's 0.69 degrees Celsius is what we've dropped. Yes. So, again, great article. Thank you. What's Up With That, once again, for covering this article about this book. You guys can check it out here. Amazon, Science Under Attack, The Age of Unreason by Ralph B. Alexander. I recommend everybody giving this a read. Check it out. All right, so let's go to some weather. We talked about cyclonic activity. I wanted to check out Leslie here. Look at that. That thing, that system, thank God, is nothing, but that thing is massive. I mean, it covers almost the entire center of the Atlantic, and the tail of this thing reaches almost the Florida Keys. And that's also driving Kirk to move into this region. That system is pushing down on Kirk to move southwest. So interesting. Some tropical waves coming off of Africa. But again, as I showed you, the dust plume that we have coming off of the coast of Africa, I think will absorb most of that energy. And the temperatures on the oceans are still not really favorable. Here is the tropical Atlantic sea surface temperature anomaly, just barely above baseline. And then we have the North Atlantic. It's kind of steadying right now at a negative 0.714 degrees Celsius below baseline. So not really dropping anymore, just kind of staying put. And then, of course, the El Nino, which is just out of control. And I really think that, you know, there should be some kind of further look into this anomaly reading and what it really means. And is this just a sudden jolt and then we see a gradual decline once again? I don't know. Because the movement of this temperature was striking to me before even speaking to anybody about this. But, you know, certain people I talked to about this confirmed my suspicions as well. Let's take a look at our GFS models, because we got a lot of moisture coming here on the East Coast once again. Talking about the 27th going into Friday of the 28th. We see West Virginia, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, South Carolina, chances of showers, but the heavier stuff moving into western Pennsylvania, reaching up into New England this weekend, New Hampshire, Connecticut, Massachusetts, upstate New York, parts of Maine. And then look at this. This weekend, we have chances of snow in Wyoming, northeast Wyoming, and that chance quickly diminishes. But we also see Minnesota with some snow showers possible as well. This is the cold front that a certain individual was blaming the grand solar minimum for. Yeah, that's cold. It's cold. The snow shouldn't be flying just yet. I get you, but I'm sure we can look up some records and we'll see it. Oh, and then we have Hurricane, is this Rosa or Rita? Where's she at? Let me go find her real quick, guys. Sorry about the delay here. I know where she's at. Hold on. Current storms. I want to address her. Hurricane Rosa, 125 knots. Pressure of 1008 and dropping. Check this out. This is her path right here. And it'll be a tropical storm. It shows hurricane status until 11 a.m. Monday. Turns into a tropical storm. And then as it gets into the Baja area, into New Mexico, I want to check this out. Let's go back to our GFS radar. And let's show you what they have. This is the idea, the thinking right now. But as we move through Friday, chances of snow through northeast Wyoming, rain moving off the east coast, developing in the North Carolina areas and South Carolina, but moving out by Saturday evening. And check out Rosa, Hurricane Rosa here in your bottom left screen. She's approaching the Baja area on Sunday, September 30th. Meanwhile, we got more snow showers developing in BC, Alberta, just really spread out through Canada on Monday, October 1st. Flakes are flying, but we also have a tropical storm approaching landfall in New Mexico. And this is by Tuesday, October 2nd. Look at that. the storm system has still got it together as it's totally over land, and we see heavy snow also coming into the region. BC, Alberta, watch out, more snow, more moisture. And this is still Tuesday. This is a fast-moving low-pressure system. It goes across the Colorado, Nebraska, the Dakotas, into Minnesota, and then bam, intensifies once again. And there's a cold front just above that, and it's going to grab a hold of that storm system and ride up in the northern plains through the Great Lakes before, by the time it exits throughout Nova Scotia, a line of showers and thunderstorms develop across the Midwest into Indiana and northern Ohio through central Ohio into Thursday, late week next week. And look at all the chances for moisture in Iowa and Minnesota and Wisconsin, Oklahoma. Again, snow showers in Wyoming as early as October 5th of next week or the following week. And heavy snow showers going into Colorado, the Denver area. Snow above here near Toronto, just above us here in the Great Lakes. And of course, this long line of moisture once again forming across the Midwest into the south, into the southeast, and this again low pressure system moving across off the east coast. And look out, there's another storm heading up through the Baja area, through Mexico and into New Mexico, into Texas. Now here's where it gets tricky. So we've got this this tropical moisture that could be here in the middle of the country, but look at the cold air behind this storm. The entire state of Wyoming has been getting snow showers flirted with between October 1st and October 5th. And then 4 days after that, we have a major snowstorm developing on October 9th. As that system leaves the East Coast, this system gets its act together and combines with the low pressure out of the Pacific, and snow seems to hang around for at least 24 hours in Wyoming and moving into parts of Colorado before this low pressure system screams off into Canada, bringing snow behind it and more rain chances across, you guessed it, the Midwest, into the Carolinas and out to the East Coast before, if you look to the northwest, another system in BC and Alberta with heavy snow, freezing rain, and lots of precipitation, folks. So a very active beginning to October when it comes to moisture and snow, surprisingly. And let's take a look at our temperatures to get that, actually. And of course, we see the freezing marks in the higher elevations here in the beginning. The end of September, we start to see that cold Arctic air starting to filter down. By the time we get to October 1st, we're still seeing 30s and freezing in Canada. Not quite yet so much widespread in the United States. But that's going to change on and around October 9th. And there we have a bigger pocket of colder Arctic air spilling into the United States. Montana, Idaho, Wyoming, lows in the teens on Wednesday, October 10th. As that moves out, we do get a brief, what we call Indian summer, here is the second week of October, and you can see the very sharp line of this cold front that's moving through on the 12th of October. Areas that were 80 degrees on the 11th in October will be 37 degrees in 24 hours after that. So watch out for a drastic temperature reduction between October 10th in the Northeast. We are looking at highs near 74 degrees in Syracuse. And by the 14th, the 13th of October, lows of 38 degrees. So 74 to 38 and 24 to 36 hours. And then, of course, daytime highs don't even make it out of the mid-50s after that. And then if you look at the futurecast here, this is typical daytime highs for October 13th for the Northeast, Ohio, the Northern Plains, Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, Utah, Colorado. And here's another thing that I've noticed too, this pattern that's developed here in the middle of the country, where I thought last winter we saw a lot of warmer temperatures in this region throughout off and on the winter, seeing the colder air here, and the colder air here, already starting to see that set up early in the very early stages of fall. So lots to go over, guys. Lots to still happen. the hurricane situations, the ocean temperature anomalies. You know, we apologize. We've missed a few days. Myself and Mari have been under the weather. This house has gotten hit with something fierce when it comes to colds. Mari is on the mend. She's in the chat tonight. However, still not well enough to speak on the air, and wishing her to get well as soon as possible. But you know, we've missed a few days this week, and it's not that there was nothing to report, because yesterday there was a plethora of things to talk about. But things change so fast, I've noticed, and especially I think in 2018, I think we're seeing an acceleration of how fast things actually are changing, and hopefully people understand that this is not just some kind of scare tactic for profit or anything like that. This is a channel that is only interested in reporting about news that's related to grand solar minimum type weather events, and we pick the stories that we think best highlight what to expect on a normal basis. We try not to drive every story that's extreme, but we do try to pick the ones that we feel like that this is the more common things that we're going to see in the years to come. So with that being said, I want to thank everybody for tuning in tonight. Please like and share and subscribe if you haven't already do that, and make sure you hit that red bell, because a lot of folks aren't getting notifications. So if you want to get the notifications when we go on live, I normally try to announce a show at least a couple hours before showtime. All right, guys, that's going to do it for us tonight. Have a good evening, and we will talk soon. Welcome back to the Grand Solar Minimum channel. Today is Friday, September 28th, 2018. It's been a very busy day today. First, I want to start by saying that my thoughts and prayers are with the people in Palu, Indonesia. Today, after the earthquake, I arrived at my place of employment and felt the need to announce about the tsunami that had happened and the compassion that I felt for these people, because in the earthquake report that I did this morning, they reported that there was a tsunami warning, and then later it was canceled. And not more than about an hour and a half after we reported this live, I saw the video on severeweather.eu of this tsunami that hit today, and we'll talk more about that as we get into the program. So I left the links to the videos in the description, as I really felt like that this was something that wasn't going to get out there automatically, and that there was already misinformation, total opposite of what was reported. Thanks to Mari for putting out another video, some footage, horrible footage of what has happened over there today with people who are told that the tsunami warning was canceled. But I'll get more into that. Let's go ahead and report some space weather real quick. Take a look at our solar wind speeds. We're sitting at a 381.7 kilometers per second with a density of 13.6. Our sun is once again blank, and this is 15 days in a row, making it 157 days without sunspots. We'll also talk about that as well later in the program. There was an article that surfaced today, Dr. Tony Phillips. Our KP indices are sitting at a 2 with a 24-hour max of 3. And we've already been checking out our SDO in motion. And here we have some coronal hole action that we saw last night, talking about coming from the eastern limb. This is expected to affect Earth's magnetic field by October 2nd through the 3rd. So maybe some minor disruptions in geomagnetic storms possible. But right now, it is looking like October 2nd through the 3rd when this could arrive. Other than that, nothing to report. 0 sunspots. Nothing looking like it's coming around the bend as well. Our TSI is holding steady at 1360.6631. We've seen the levels elevate a little bit into the 0.7 values and as high as 0.8. And here recently we are starting to see a new trend now where it is declining ever so slightly. And like I said, we will see this over time, and that's why I try to zoom this graph out a little bit. This is only showing us data from July 22nd through September 17th. Or actually, this is for the, yes, September 17th as far as this goes out. So you can see through the last couple months how it's gone up and down. It's really, but if you put a line in the middle of it, there's not much movement up or down. Only here recently in the tail end of this graph have we seen a little bit of declination in the chart. And as we stated at the beginning, many people were reporting about this incident today. Tsunami waves struck parts of Indonesia after powerful 7.5 earthquake hit the island. This was at 10:02 UTC. Tsunami waves up to 10 feet hit the city of Palu, and growing tourist resort with population of about 350,000. The nearby fishing town of Dangla, population's 280,000. Both located some 50 miles from the epicenter after the Indonesian authorities lifted the tsunami alert. Unofficial reports received by 1800 UTC mentioned at least 6 deaths, including one caused by the earlier 6.1 and dozens injured. The second quake was felt very strongly. We expect more damage and more victims. Numerous buildings have been destroyed and damaged, as well as roads, bridges, and other infrastructure. Some 20,000 people are estimated to have felt the severe shaking, 73,000 very strong, and 604,000 strong. 1.3 million moderate, and 12 million light to weak. Here's some of the pictures, and the one that strikes me the most is down here with the before and after picture of this bridge. There is one video footage of the tsunami wave, and the internet was lit up with the videos today. Here is the impact of this wave as it comes in this billboard. Now, they said it was a 10-foot wave. At least 10 foot, if not higher, possibly 15 feet. I've seen other people talking that it could have been a 30-foot wave. Here's the picture I want to show you. This is from the earthquake and the tsunami. There's the after. That's a pretty big structure there. There was another article that I found, and here's the thing, guys. What I don't like about this, and I guess that no one's trying to hide anything, but the seriousness of this event, to me, and the lack of information, which they're all the way across the world. But what I found interesting was that when we reported this morning on the earthquake, the 7.5, and right before we went live, I even looked at Mari and said, wow, Fox News and ABC are the #2 people that are reporting on this story. And it was just weird that these two mainstream media channels that usually don't cover, I mean, how many times did PNG have 6.5 and higher earthquakes? How many times have we seen volcanoes erupt and 150,000 people evacuated, and that doesn't get talked about? So what I guess I'm saying is that there are people that knew this was a big deal from the minute it happened, which is why Fox News and ABC News, I saw anyway, were the first two articles that popped in the Google search. Maybe it could have been a narrative for the mainstream media to try to change the channel as far as what's been happening in this recent days of Brett Kavanaugh's hearings. Possible. But I think it's a little more than that. But the thing that really crushes me the most is that these people were told that the tsunami warning was lifted. And it just didn't feel right reporting that this morning, and then right before going into work announcing the massive tsunami that hit. Now, I'm not trying to pump this up by any means, and I want to warn everybody right now. I'm getting ready to show you some video that is from a channel of a person who is just your average guy who apparently likes dirt bikes. He has his own YouTube channel. He's got 11 subscribers. Actually, I'm number 12. And he decided to put together a small video tonight, or last night over there, I should say, after the events of the destruction that was underneath these receded waters. And I'm just going to tell you right now, guys, I'm warning you. This is a disturbing video. There is going to be the link in the description. I'm only going to play a little bit. I think it's important that the news gets out and the truth gets out, because so far that I'm seeing on Google, I just feel like the injuries and the death counts are being played down here at this point, as if nothing to see here. But I'll go ahead and play this video just for a little bit. I'm not going to play it in its entirety. Very dark, not very good quality video equipment here, folks. So this was definitely done on his cell phone. Give it a minute here. But to me, we have watched this entire video, and we counted at least 6, and that's all I'm going to show. This is the guy's channel. The video is 3 minutes and 45 seconds long, and the very beginning, right off the bat, we see unfortunately 2 bodies from this, and I unfortunately also believe that the death toll will rise a lot more than what we are being told right now. So, I felt like he put this together to show the world, and that way when we start hearing reports of minimal injury, minimal destruction, and minimal death, I don't know why it would happen, but it's been 24 hours and we still don't have a real full report just yet on exact structure damages or anything like that. Marty, do you have something to add?
Actually, I do. I don't know if I can reach. Let me hop over. I'm buried under animals and stuff, cats and dogs. I'm just joking. Jake's shaking his head at me. Really? I found an article. It looks like the Telegraph has found this too, because they're talking about a video that appeared to be taken at night. 30 people were killed and taken to the hospital, and so this is a vetted video that is circling Indonesia right now. So right now on this news article, which I'll post in the description, just found it, it's saying that there's at least 30 in this just small area. You watch this full video, it's like every 2 stops there's someone on the ground. It's absolutely devastating.
Thank you, Mari. And I know she was really concerned about even talking about this video tonight because it wasn't vetted. But look at the views on this, guys. Nobody even... I mean, this is just an average citizen here. He looks like a young man as well. Can't be more than 18, 19 years old. And 17 views. But I wanted to share this because I hope that the truth is coming out. And the Telegraph is the first website, you think, tonight that's actually...
I've been looking. It seems like a lot of the video footage on this tsunami is repetitive and it's all the same. You don't get a lot of unique perspectives. It's such a remote area, blah, blah, blah. So it's hard to find stuff. I came across this one, I don't know, 6-7 hours ago. And I don't know if this is the original poster or if it's been mirrored from somewhere, but I haven't seen a duplicate of this video, and it took me back watching it. It's just so sad.
I'm going to go ahead and go away from that. And again, we watched it right before the show, and I really wanted to handle this with kid gloves because there is the appearance of a child that was discovered during this video as well that had washed up from the receding waters. Just stuff like this. This is what really, I guess, connects to me today, is that my heart breaks for these people because of what they were told originally, and then they were told to let your guard down, and then at the snap of a finger, here comes at least a 10-foot wave. Some are reporting it was as high as 30 feet. So, very terrible news tonight from this region. Earlier today, they were rocked with a 7.5 earthquake with numerous strong aftershocks of at least 5.4 or higher. Another one at 6.7, another one at 6.1. Just terrible day today in that region, and hopefully we can get some aid to these people and help them rebuild and help them find their loved ones, and hopefully minimize injury and death at this point. But this is very, very, very tricky situation. And the point I was trying to make was that, this to me has got the ingredients for a media blackout type event where we don't see as much or the truth. This video earlier too, Mari shared another video. Look at that. This roof is caving in from the earthquake. In the video, these people are crying, and they sound very, very scared, very terrified. So again, we'll just have to sit here and hope for the best, and hope that we can get some global aid sent out there to help assist these people in recovery, and hopefully still rescue missions as well. I'll leave the links in the description, guys, and you guys can check out the video for yourselves. Again, I issue strong caution. It's not something for the faint of heart, I will say that. Moving on to some grand solar minimum news. I saw this on SPACEWEATHER.com, and then Anthony Watts over here at What's Up With That shared this on his website as well. And it's by Dr. Tony Phillips, and this was made yesterday on the 27th. And he's quoted saying that the sun is entering one of the deepest solar minima in the space age. Sunspots have been absent for most of 2008, and the sun's ultraviolet output has sharply dropped. New research shows that Earth's upper atmosphere is responding. We are seeing a cooling trend. And he also goes on to say, high above the Earth's surface near the edge of space, our atmosphere is losing heat energy. If current trends continue, it could soon set a space-age record for cold. These results come from the SABRE instrument on board NASA's TIME satellite. SABRE monitors infrared emissions from carbon dioxide and nitric oxide, two substances that play a key role in the energy balance of air 100 to 300 kilometers above our planet's surface. By measuring the infrared glow of these molecules, SABRE can assess the thermal state of gas at the very top of the atmosphere, a layer researchers call the thermosphere. It says here the thermosphere always cools off during solar minimum. It's one of the most important ways the solar cycle affects us. When the thermosphere cools, it shrinks, literally decreasing the radius of Earth's atmosphere. The shrinkage decreases aerodynamic drag on satellites in low Earth orbit, extending their lifetimes. That's the good news. But the bad news is that it also delays the natural decay of space junk, resulting in a more cluttered environment around the Earth. To help us keep track of what's happening in the thermosphere, Malinczak and colleagues recently introduced Thermosphere Climate Index, TCI, a number expressed in watts that tells how much heat no molecules or nitrous oxide molecules are dumping into space. It's definitely not no, it's nitric oxide. During solar maximum, TCI is high, hot. During solar minimum, it is low, cold. Right now, it is very low indeed. SABRE is currently measuring 33 billion watts of infrared power from the NO. That is 10 times smaller than seeing during the more active solar phases. Now, here is a graph that shows us the solar cycles, and it lines everything up to how warm our climate was during these periods of time. And here's our peak, which it was neutral. The warming had paused, so that's accurate. What I find sobering and convincing is the bottom of this graph here. And where we are presently, are we done declining? Is this going to continue to drop a little bit further? But we are below that cold and a possibility of a deeper minimum than what we had in 2009. This paper right here, this little article that was written up by Mr. Tony Phillips is confirming that we are looking at some cold months ahead of us. And this should not be a surprise, because we talked about this earlier in the spring when we were talking about Australia and the southern hemisphere getting walloped with record cold early in the season. And I know a lot of us know that what we see in the southern hemisphere in our spring is what we're going to expect for our winter. So in other words, their winter is a preview of what's to come for the northern hemisphere, and it's bad. August values for the Dr. Roy Spencer temperature anomaly dropped significantly. And a lot of the reason why it dropped so much in August is that we lost so much warmth in the southern hemisphere, up to 1.04 degrees Celsius in Australia alone. And that really set, now everybody else around the world, the areas all registered lower, but clearly the biggest temperature drop was in that Australian region. So, interesting article. I see it on SPACEWEATHER.com, and also What's Up With That. This one kind of went a little more detail. I figured I'll go ahead and show you guys this, but nonetheless, same author, just explain a little bit more in detail here. And here we go once again. We are talking about, and I'll translate this if it'll let me. If not, I will tell you what it says. The gist. Good Lord. It's blocking me, Mari.
What's blocking you? Do you want me to fix it, Jake? Can we skip that article?
Yeah, let's skip it. I'll tell you what it was, though. It was Germany had basically missed the target on their climate treaty.
Which tab was it?
It was that one. It's not that important, though.
Well, I can fix that while you talk about
But
that.
it was basically talking about how it missed the target by 3%. And with that being said, that means Germany had to pay up. And the way that this article was putting it, basically it was saying, yeah, Germany's okay with paying it now because we're only in the millions of euros that is owed, but wait till that starts getting into the billions, and I don't think it's translated. It's not that big of a deal.
Can't you fudge it?
No.
Come on, Jake, give it a try. Just joking.
So I'll leave the link in the description. You guys can check this out. But basically, Germany is not hitting its target. Supposedly, they're poised to make their first payments. And this article raises the question, how long is that going to continue? If the bill continues to go higher and Germany does not continue to reach its target, it is, you know, when are these countries going to look at people and say, all right, that's it, we're done with this. This is costing us too much money. I think they're being good sports about it, and they don't want to swallow that pill, that's for sure. Elon Musk sued for fraud by the SEC. Tesla electric car company stocks tank. And they did tank. They were sitting in the 400 value per share. Now roughly about $277 a share. U.S. securities regulators on Thursday sought to force Tesla Incorporated chief executive Elon Musk out of the company he helped get off the ground about 15 years ago, alleging he misled shareholders when he tweeted he had funding for what would have been the largest ever corporate buyout. I don't think this is going to stop here. I think next on the agenda, after they bring him in for Tesla, they're going to be going after him for Solar City. Last I checked, Solar City was slated to have around 1,500 jobs in Buffalo, New York by February of 2018. As of late, I believe that number is between 500 and 700 employees employed by Solar City. There's still about 500 jobs off from where they were supposed to be. Now, why is this significant? New York State gave this guy a lot of money, somewhere in the tune of $750 million. And Elon Musk misled the state of New York. He originally had Panasonic slated as the maker of his panels. And at the last minute, or I might be reversing this, but he did a okie dokie and switched the company. So instead of it being blah, 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 it was Panasonic or vice versa. I don't remember exactly the order. Anyway, he still misled the state of New York. And they gave him all this money, and he built his factories, and yet it's still not even halfway full of the employees and the jobs that he promised Buffalo and the state of New York. So when I saw this story, I thought this is worth talking about because there's a lot of us out there who think this guy's full of crap. He is the Al Gore of solar panels. Let's just put it that way. The guy really doesn't have a clue what he's doing. And he's crashing and burning. This isn't the first time we've read an article about Tesla failing. But $420 a share, and now it's dropped to $277 during the after-hour trading on Thursday night. That's almost 10%. So he looks like he's in a little bit of hot water here. And like I said, I don't think this will be the last time we'll see an article quite like this. He will probably have to face what's going to have to happen with this with Tesla. And then, like I said, Solar City, I mean, what kind of a leash do you give this guy if you're the state of New York and you know that you've given this man a lot of money to invest back into the state and help it be prosperous, and he's not doing what he said he would do. So stuff's starting to catch up to this guy. The SpaceX thing can't happen fast enough for him because that might be the only thing that saves him as far as financially. He might be able to make enough money if SpaceX actually works. But there's a lot of folks out there that are doubting him on that as well. I mean, look, this Tesla thing's going down the tank. The Solar City's down the tank. What makes anyone expect the SpaceX moon trip to be a success? Good luck to you, Mr. Musk. You're going to need it. SA, solar cycle wave frequency linked to jet stream changes. Guys, I'm going to read most of this because I really feel like this is really important to the education of the grand solar minimum and climate. And I was very pleased to read this article earlier tonight. I feel like this has got the substance of the foundation of the space science and the space weather that we talk about here on this channel. And I think this paper should be reviewed a few times to help some of us out there understand. We start off by seeing the line, "It's not the heat, it's the humanity," by Francis Tucker Mann's PhD. Here we have a graph of our solar cycles, the current solar cycle 24, which is predicted to continue to drop all the way to the bottom, just like they do in every other minimum. Right now, we're being told that this current minimum is apparently going to be lower than the minimum that we saw in 2009. And here we have, right here is where we were in 09. If we're going to be deeper than that, does that mean we're just going to be flatline with zero solar activity for several years? Who knows? Interesting times ahead. Here we go. Abstract. The sun controls the climate, not industry, not you, not me. It is the sun. Solar cycle 24, the weakest in 100 years, is stumbling to an end. The sunspot cycle averages about 11 years or so. There may not be any sunspots this week. In the spring of 2017, the sunspot number was low or zero, and Canada was plagued with spring floods from melting snow and heavy rainfall. I do believe this was written last year. Major floods have occurred in Quebec and caused a human tragedy and loss of habitation. The army was called in. The fire chief was lost at Cache Creek in BC. Canada is wet from the Pacific to the Atlantic, which right now it's pretty soggy. It's not quite in the situation that it was last year. But Toronto Island is sandbagged and may be closed for several months. The Lake Ontario high water, the 22nd anniversary of the previous highest water levels records. This year, the Minden, Ontario flood occurred on the 11th anniversary. Okay, so here we go. The first two correlations. 22nd anniversary, which was 2 minimums ago, and the 11th anniversary, which was 1 minimum ago. Hurricane Hazel, 1954, also occurred during a solar minimum. 88 people died in Toronto, and Toronto abandoning living in its beautiful wooden ravines. Toronto, if you will, is within a Great Lakes cloud chamber. Interesting how they're lining up all of these flooding events, tragic moments, with minimums, like we have seen several times. History supports this hypothesis. The horrible Johnstown flood occurred on 31st of May, 1889, with a loss of 2,200 people. The Johnston flood of 1936 and another Johnston flood in 1977 occurred during solar minima. In 1977, 12 inches of rain fell in 24 hours when a thunderstorm stalled over the area. So we've seen a lot of that, between 12 and 18 inches of rain falling in just a 24-hour period in areas that don't get that in 4 months. But these phenomena are not restricted to North America or Canada. In early June, rescue workers battled to reach remote areas of Bangladesh hit by landslides and heavy rains that have killed at least 137 people, with dozens more missing. The landslides were triggered by heavy monsoon rains, with 13.5 inches of rain falling on the area. In May, Sri Lanka had suffered 2,000 deaths due to landslides and 200,000 displaced this spring. On July 1st, 2017, China reported its highest rainfall in 60 years. The climate is changing globally, but it's not caused by the heat. It's the humidity. The effect on the solar cycle is seriously misunderstood. There is no correlation with the number of sunspots, though we know that the sunspots are a proxy for sunspot electromagnetic behavior. I kind of understand why Mr. Watts said he disagreed with some of this. I do think that our sunspots, there is a correlation, but the rest of this article to me is right on. Astrophysicists in Denmark, however, have teased out the relationship between sunspots and climate. It's the frequency of the wave. Very tight correlation to climate is coupled with the frequency of solar cycle. When solar cycles are shorter than 11 years, over several cycles, the planet warms. Listen to this, people. When the solar cycles are shorter than 11 years, over several cycles, the planet warms. When solar cycles are longer than 11 years for a few cycles, the planet cools. There has been a strong 95% correlation between the solar cycle and cooling and warming of the northern hemisphere over the past 150 years. Climate, moreover, is also tightly tied in what Zarkova has called the heartbeat of the sun. Ironically, Locklear in 1872 called sunspot observation the meteorology of the future. Ask your weather bureau if this is true. The influence has always been on the peaks, but the real story is the troughs and the wavelengths. And here's how it works. When sunspot peaks are far apart, the electromagnetic shield is down for a long period of time. Cosmic radiation seeds the clouds, and there is more rain and snow with the albedo reflectivity. The planet cools. Svensbark, 2016, another example. The rainfall makes sense in this context because cooling results in condensation. When the sunspot peaks are frequent, the minima have less effect and Earth warms. Again, another SPACEWEATHER reference for 1997 and another SPACEWEATHER paper in 2007. This pattern is completely consistent with the extremes of the thundery hot summers and cold winters of the Little Ice Age, which coincided with the Maunder minimum. Sunspots are very few, completely absent for 60 years. Zarkova's research group is predicting another Little Ice Age beginning right now, today, or at the end of cycle 24. So many think others who study the sun and think it trumps carbon dioxide. Interesting to hear Zarkova say we're starting it right now. Was it your impression when we did the interview, Mari, that Zarkova really felt like we had a few more years of more? Let's digest the information first before we go ahead and say that.
Yeah, she was definitely just let's wait and see. A lot of people took her work, and I know at least in the States, overblew everything, like, and turned it into a sensationalist piece, which it's not. And if you watch our Zarkova interview, you'll see she ends that with, this is the research. It's very accurate, very solid. And the truth is, this is something we need just to watch unfold and, be alert and be ready for. So she never said in stone what was going to happen. It was more just, she sort of ended on the note, it's exciting. We live in exciting times. We're going to watch and see this happen. It's happened in the past. People survived through it, got through it, and we're going to do it again.
So with Zarkova now kind of ramping it up now, this paper was basically, this article was written in 2017. Again, we interviewed her that year, and she was a little more, earlier in that year as well, she was a little bit more reserved to that. So it's interesting to see her kind of jump this up a little bit more. But folks, that's what we've been talking about too, with the longer winters and the hotter summers, the thundery hot summers. This happened in the Maunder minimum. So there was nothing unusual about this summer. There was nothing unusual about that heat. So here's how NASA says we are entering a solar minimum. Our wispy atmosphere shrinks, which we've already talked about earlier about the thermosphere. NASA has learned to juggle satellites that drop into lower orbits during the solar cycle. Lower down in the atmosphere of the sun drives our winds, and the most important winds of all that rule the others are the jet streams and power around the planet, well over 160 kilometers an hour. When the atmosphere contracts, the jet starts to meander. The meandering happens because there is a problem in space, and that problem is low solar wind. That's when our jet stream begins to meander. And this study correlates with what I've learned as well about the meandering of these jet streams and low solar wind. More solar wind, the jet streams are tight and organized. The same jet stream is jammed into less volume within a shrunken atmosphere, hence the jet streams kink. The cloud levels are slightly but measurably lower as well, which we've talked about several times as well. You notice, and everyone can agree with this, we've got two sets of clouds. We've got high atmosphere clouds that are very thin and wispy, and then we have these very puffy, thick, low-level clouds, which occur during these solar minimums. Figure 1, the relationship between weather and jet stream Rossby wave. The meanders with ridges and troughs similar to those of the great river like the Mississippi, but far more vast, typically carry the weather fronts with them, with low pressure and high pressure zones, a ridge and a trough. The jet streams maintain their velocity and solar maximum but wander far north and farther south, taking colder air south and hotter air north. The meanders are called Rossby waves, hence wide temperature variations occur. Most of North America had 2 temperature swings in May from the teens to the high 20s and back again. Kinking of the jet stream causes extreme weather, which I'd also believe when they're saying the kinking part, they're referring to the Greenland block, where we start to see the kinking of the jet stream, which also brings in extreme weather as well. As the wandering is slow, the storms behave like broken law sprinklers. Under certain conditions, a normal weather front can cause dangerous flooding because although the jet stream is moving rapidly, the lateral course of the jet stream meanderway wanders slowly from the west to the east and occasionally stalls. Again, Greenland blocking. But pretty much here, the bottom line, and this is another part that I love about this, only matching your right hand with your left hand might exceed 95%. Not meaning to be glib, but 95% for solar leaves, only 5% for any other cause without considering the standard deviation. And what he's talking about here is what drives the climate. And he's telling us right here in this study that 95% of this is the sun, which only leaves 5% for everything else. And I've talked about how I believe ocean temperatures or temperatures on this planet and climate are controlled by the oceans. That's 95%, and then 5% is the other factor. So there's that number of 95% and 5% being the other cause. This study here says the sun is 95%. Other studies will tell you that our oceans are 95%. But the same is the same on the 5% for the other cause being human or industry or whatever. This paper is very, very good. It goes on to mention Henrik Svensmark and his work, talking about cosmic rays, seeding the clouds. Conclusions, I'll read this last part here. The logical progression is for rain to fall, clouds to clear, the earth to cool, and humidity to drop, and warmth to not return until sunspots return. Regardless whether or not this forecast is correct, we must understand the danger for flawed government science is that public science policy can lead to disaster. For example, mistakes like cholesterol, myths started in the 1950s by Eisenhower doctors, or the denial of lead poison water in Flint, Michigan by the EPA. NGOs, environmental lobby groups, industries, and governments are creating policy for the warming forecast, but serious cooling could be coming. Keeping our environment healthy is paramount to our prosperity, but free speech and science and not false consensus is part of the solution. Yet in holding scientific research and discovery and respect, as we should, we must also be alert to the equal and opposite danger that public policy could itself become the captive of science technological elite. And that was quoted from Dwight Eisenhower. Again, lots of good references here. Svensmark several times and Zarkova. And we invite you guys to check this out on your own. Take a look at it. And one more thing before I leave this particular story and move on to our weather outlook. The 50 days that we had this summer that were below average. Let's get something straight before I want to go any further. Because we talked about warmth and cooling in the Arctic. And this summer, we had temperatures below normal in the Arctic. And we are now above average heading into winter in the Arctic. And that causes the situation of more water vapor in our atmosphere when we have a warmer than average Arctic and a cooler than average Arctic in the summer. Warmer than average in the winter means more snow for us here in the Northern Hemisphere. And that's exactly what's going on right now. Forgive me, Rob had sent me a graph that's showing the temperature averages right now. Maybe I'll get that up tomorrow or Sunday, whichever day we do the show. But it really kind of made sense talking to him for a little bit about it and understanding what that means. And another clear example of people like Paul Beckwith, who will look at, who will ignore the slightly below average temperatures of the winter, but will jump all over the fact that we're, 5% above normal for this time of year. Small number, happens. Again, 5% above normal is still freezing in the Arctic, but that slight rise in temperature will put more water vapor in the atmosphere, and which will lead to a lot more snow than probably what we would want. So you factor in that today on SPACEWEATHER.com and What's Up With That were a story that was featured about how our thermosphere is shrinking and that we are going to be setting a new space age record for cold. So now, are we talking about below Maunder minimum conditions? It's going to be a huge challenge. A lot more people on this planet right now than there was during the Maunder minimum. But with the talk of the colder conditions, the shrinking thermosphere, this paper here, which I think is everything that you need to know about global warming and global cooling and grand solar minimum, this correlates sunspots to temperature, to extreme weather, to jet stream, solar wind. It has it all. So you factor in the thermosphere shrinking, and then the discussion I had today talking about the reason why we're going to see so much snow, and the proof is in the pudding. So we do know that we are going to be looking at some pretty extreme snowfalls this winter in 2018 and 2019. I usually don't say things in that kind of a confidence because that's what weathermen do. They predict and forecast. But when you look at the data, and like we've been talking about this for months. I've been talking about this behind the scenes with people that we communicate all the time about this cold, about what's to come this winter. Even last year we were talking about how this winter was going to be a little different than last. We thought 17 and 18 was bad. 18 and 19 still maybe just getting up to the top of the roller coaster hill. 1920 is where we might need to worry a little bit more about cold and a lot of snow. So just an interesting paper. Lots of correlations, and the same people that will tell you about you can't use correlations for science are also going to try to tell you that you have to correlate rise in CO2 with the rise in temperature. So hypocrisy at its finest, but this is a great study, great paper with awesome references about people who are actually studying the sun's behavior, the cosmic rays, the cloud seeding of highly charged particles, and it also mentions that you're going to see more rain and more snow with this situation. So I think it's time we start taking these things a little more seriously. And for me, as someone who reports on this almost on a daily basis, it's unfolding right before my eyes, as I was told 2 years ago and last year. So just wanted to share that with you guys tonight. Take a look at our GFS report. Not much has changed from what we saw last night in our broadcast. They're still putting Hurricane Rosa into the Four Corner area by October 2nd. Thankfully, the Gulf chances and everything are kind of quiet right now. This storm heads out of here, and then something forms across the Midwest, a big low pressure system. And there is that snowstorm that we were talking about the other night for October 9th. Not that unusual. This area does see snow like that for October. So that is not that really big of a deal. But plenty of moisture in the future cast for GFS. Now, for temperatures, Judah Cohn, which I really respect, and this guy is always right, it seems. And I thought maybe I could catch him being wrong. But going through this GFS, I want to take you through. This is through the end of September. You see our daytime highs in the 60s for the most part in the Northeast, keeping the heat mainly in the South, and that's where it belongs at this time of the year. But we do get a bit of that East Ridge warm-up once again, as Judah Cohen predicts that we will see a little bit more warmth than we probably would normally in October. So this could be our Indian summer for the first 10 to 12 days of October. I don't think it's going to last past the 13th or 14th. And neither does Judah Cohen. But here is the latest look here at the GFS run. We see temperatures in around October 3rd still in the 60s, 70s, and 80s in the Midwest, the South, and even parts of upstate New York could see an 80-degree reading on October 3rd. Now, a strong cold front, as you see, pushes across the country, and the 70s and 80s start retreating south of Pennsylvania, and by the 5th, we look to be cooling down just a little bit, but the East is not giving up yet as that warmth tries to hold on there on the Carolinas, Virginia on October 6th. But as we get past the 6th of October, we see a big cool down, the heat trying to build back up one more time, and this is October 11th, October 12th. We see a sharp drop from the 11th to the 12th. High of 80 degrees possible for Albany, New York on October 11th. So we have a chance of 2 days of 80-degree weather in upstate New York, where really it was not forecasted in the long term here at all. And as we see that cold front pushing through, temperatures in the 50s and 60s, and overnight lows starting to get into the 20s in Maine, parts of upstate New York. As we stop, this is daytime high temperatures. This reminds me a lot like last year's patterns, and this is what I mean. You got the northwest, and then you got this ridge, and then it drops back down over the east, leaving the northeast and the northwest cooler, just like last year's pattern. And it's already getting in line right now. So that tells me that we're expected to have more meandering of the jet stream due to lack of solar activity, but also with lack of solar activity comes more coronal holes because the corona becomes weaker. So just interesting to watch. We'll keep our eyes on it. Taking a look at our SSTs, our tropical Atlantic temperature anomaly, the East Tropical Atlantic, slightly going up today to 0.312 above baseline Celsius. Looking at our North Atlantic, it is staying steady at negative 0.718, dropped quite a bit from September 15th. And then our Nino region, and Rob and I have talked about this too. This is a very big jump for this time of the year, and as much as it's kind of crept up and down over the past several months. But right now, the readings are still coming in at 0.677 above Celsius. I'm sorry, Celsius above baseline temperatures. So as of right now, we are in the go for a possibility of an El Nino. We'll just have to continue to monitor this and see what happens. A lot of people were saying it was going to happen late winter, like around January, February. If these records continue to hold up, then we might have to recalculate that, and it might start a little sooner than that, maybe a lot sooner actually. But again, I think at worst, we're looking at a Mudaki El Nino, and I think a lot of us will agree that this will be closer to a neutral El Nino than recent of past. And looking at our tropical weather, guys, Leslie has turned into a tropical storm, so she has intensed a little bit, just slightly, 50-mile-an-hour sustained winds. And Kirk is still a tropical storm, weaker winds at 40 miles per hour. We will monitor the situation as well, but also the good news that we saw in the GFS was that the Gulf looks like it's going to be quiet. The East Coast, thankfully, is going to stay quiet. But we are going to watch the Hurricane Rosa situation in the Pacific, as that one is an unusual storm. Not saying it's not possible to happen, but unusual that this system is staying put together for as long as it will. It is monsoon season already, but actually, folks, we got 2 storms moving through there. Here's Hurricane Rosa, and then slightly after that, right around looks like the 8th of October, we have another storm that comes through the Bajas once again. This is a little more east of New Mexico, going into western Texas as well. So we'll have to keep our eyes. We talked about that last night too, the possibility of 2 systems combining here. And what's interesting to watch is as you watch this second storm coming from the Pacific, it almost looks like it stalls out this front up here and makes it sit over its area a little longer, because this is a lot stronger pressure system than the one moving in from northwest. And as you see, it literally shields the weather from advancing and kind of just dissipates once that storm leaves the vicinity of the United States. So lots to talk about. Guys, bear with us. We just want to get the information out. We want to get the truth out. Again, our thoughts and prayers are with the folks in Indonesia tonight. And actually, Mari, I didn't know if you wanted to report or not tonight. Say hello to everybody in the chat. Thank everyone for being with us tonight. It's been a long day.
Indeed. We have some great mods helping us out in the chat. Miss C. Gypsy, Rob, Radical Gardener. Thank you all for being here. A lot of new faces. And we have some great subs that keep on coming back and joining us in the chat. I want to say hi to all of you. Hope you guys have a great weekend.
Also, I want to give a shout out to Starman and Henrik. I haven't talked to you guys in a little while. It's been crazy, but I want to let you both know that I'm thinking about you, and hope I get to see you guys around a little bit more. Not calling you out, just letting you know you guys are on my mind. Hope all is well. And thanks again for tuning in, guys. We will be back to talk more. All right, guys, so we will get back to you when the time is needed if there is any more updates on the situation in Indonesia from the recent tsunami today. Until then, guys, we will talk soon.
Thank you for tuning in to the Grand Solar Minimum channel. Here is an update on the tsunami and earthquake situation that hit Indonesia. The sun had just slipped behind the mountains, leaving a soft pink glow as the blue sea melted into the darkening horizon. It could have been a video postcard from a tropical paradise, except for the long white waves stretching the width of the bay, getting larger and closer with each passing second. By the time the fast-moving wall of frothing water slammed into the city of Palu off Indonesia's Sulawesi Island on Friday, it was 3 meters. The tsunami, triggered by a magnitude 7.5 earthquake, destroyed the beautiful scene in seconds, leaving hundreds dead. The video clip, shot on a smartphone and widely broadcast Saturday on Indonesian TV, showed water swallowing an entire row of buildings and gushing into streets and a damaged mosque as onlookers ran in terror. Pictures showed twisted tin and wood splinters floating in the coffee-colored torrent alongside cars and motorbikes that had been tossed like toys. A shopping mall was reduced to rubble. Images also showed bodies draped in crude blue tarps on the road near the beach, while others laid out in roads on concrete foundations. One man carried a dead child through the debris. Experts say the long, narrow bay running into Palu, a city of 380,000, squeezed the tsunami into a tight space, likely making the waves more dangerous. Officials said more than 400 were dead in Palu alone, and more were unaccounted for. Because of the bay, all the water comes there and collects together, and then makes it higher. A geophysicist at the University of Saya Kuala in Indonesia's Sumatra Island, where the magnitude 9.1 earthquake spawned a tsunami in 2004, killing 230,000 people in a dozen countries. Disaster agency spokesman said the waves reached as high as 6 meters in at least one area, according to a report relayed by a man who called to say he survived only by climbing and clinging onto a tree. The cities of Donggala and Mamuju were also hit, but they had not yet been reached. Roads were impassable, cut off by debris and landslides, and communications were nearly impossible. Hospitals in Palu were swamped with patients lying on the ground hooked to drips. One woman was about to give birth. They were being treated outdoors due to the continuing strong aftershocks, and many residents in the area were also sleeping outside, too afraid to return indoors. The city was eerily dark and quiet, with no electricity and not even landline phones working. A massive yellow suspension bridge crossing an estuary feeding into the bay was toppled, either by the earthquake or the tsunami, and left lying on its side in the water. Ismail said he was surprised that tsunami was generated off the coast of central Sulawesi, which sits on a strike-slip fault, producing earthquakes that typically move in a horizontal motion and do not usually displace large amounts of water. In contrast, tremblers occurring where one tectonic plate is lodged beneath another, called subduction zones can move large amounts of water vertically when strain forces one plate to pop up or dive down. The force can create devastating tsunamis like the one in Sumatra and off Japan's northeast coast in 2011. But Danny Hillman, a geologist with the Indonesian Institute of Sciences, said the Sulawesi event is more complicated. While it occurred on a strike-slip fault, he said the part that ruptured was on a small segment that can move in a vertical motion. He said that could have triggered the tsunami, which also could have been created by an underwater landslide. Indonesia's vast archipelago of more than 17,000 islands is prone to earthquakes because it's in the location on the Ring of Fire, an arc of volcanoes and fault lines in the Pacific Basin. We'll keep you updated. You guys have a great Saturday. We'll be back live tomorrow, Sunday, not sure of the time. So you guys have a great weekend. Thanks for tuning in. Please like and share.